is Behind the Games from newoverlords.com, where we seek creators of all kinds to find out what's behind our favorite games. With your hosts, Jeff and Seema.
This is New Overlords Behind the Games podcast. And from my studio just outside of Chicago, I'm Jeff Elemek.
And from our Northeast studio, I'm Seema.
Today, we're joined by Hauke Gerdes, founder and creative director of Blankhans, an exciting indie studio working on a new game that I'm really excited about called Corbourne. Hauke, hello.
Oh yeah, sorry. Thanks for having me. Hey.
Thanks for being here. I am really excited. I know it's going to be a little ways off before we get Corbourne, and we're going to talk all about it today, but I've been playing a ton of survival games lately and in general, and for a long time. I was very MMO focused.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you go back 3, 4, 5 years and before, since the beginning of MMOs. But I've been playing lately in the last few years a lot of Ark, Conan Exiles, Rust, No Man's Sky, although that's more exploration, I feel, than...
Yeah, but has some survival elements to it. So I think it's not too far-fetched to bring it up, yeah.
And then there's the newer stuff that's getting exciting, like Raft and V-Rising. All that kind of stuff has me excited. And then when I heard about what you guys were doing with Corebourne, which we'll get into, about how it's less on the PvP side, which is something I don't get into in those, I was hooked. Then I started looking at your Discord, and I started looking at your YouTube channel, and the accessibility of you and your team, and you getting the information out there, getting on streams, you on the streams narrating work in progress, very public about where the game's at, where it's going. That was super exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, which I also want to talk about today, I looked into the studio, Blankhans, and the setup of the organization and the culture and how remote first is working out. So we're definitely going to talk about some of that today too.
Cool.
And I got to say too, for me, I just love the artwork.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a long route there, to be honest. Like, it took us quite a while to nail an art style where we finally felt like it is nice and welcoming without being incredibly childish or too cartoony. We threw away a lot of assets.
Yeah. Well, I think you hit a great note.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. And I'm sure we'll talk about it more because I want to drill into that too. But before we go too far into the details, why don't you kick us off, Hauke, with just the overview of what Corbourne is for the people that see the video. We'll put a couple clips in. People can go to the Corbourne website look as well. But describe it in general, and then we'll break it apart. We'll peel the onion a little bit on that.
Yeah, I think the peeling part is incredibly essential because it is in its core a survival game. And I think you already brought up some MMOs, and that's what a lot of people kind of mistake it for without being mistaken. But in the end, it's a social survival sandbox game, even though the sandbox part is generally, it just goes hand in hand. I've played more sandboxy games, but in its core, you start on a completely normal survival journey. You're thrown into a world that's been attacked by an outer-worldly being, and now you have to regather resources that's been taken from the people, basically. And then there's other aspects to the game. And as you mentioned, the survival part is non-PvP. It is completely cooperational. You meet other people, you found towns with them, which we'll probably talk about several times today because it's a super essential feature to our gameplay. So, and then there's 2 more parts to the game. Basically, there's survival, then there's social, and there is an adventure part. The social part is, and that's maybe mostly where the MMO comes in, a major city, Korheim. You can go there, you can trade with other people, form groups, talk to them. I think a lot of people will immediately have some connection to things like World of Warcraft's major cities, like Stormwind or Orgrimmar. And then there is, I think Dauntless has something similar, a unified player hub where you can meet people from all over the the game's population. And the last part is adventure. Adventures are kind of like dungeons in its core, where you go into an instanced experience, and in that experience you can do anything. It could be you just go out there. The first one we work on is a horde mode adventure, for example. You are just thrown into a part of the map that is still outside or in the lands that have not been reclaimed yet, and you have to fight monsters, gather resources before the time runs out, and you can go back to your survival world or to the social hub. They could also be racing games. They could be anything corporational. We had very classical dungeon approaches. There is battle arenas. There is procedural maps where you just gather resources against another team or against time or something like that. There is a lot of ideas for those. And these three are, of course, logically intertwined. So to summarize, it is a survival game, but you can meet all players that are not on your survival server too, and you can also play adventures with them.
The core of the architecture, the core of the structure of, for people that are very familiar with how things like Rust and Ark and Conan work, where there's servers. You get on a servers, or maybe you can even spin up your own server. And we'll talk about that in a second, because you kind of can't do that here. The hybrid approach of there will still be servers. And I know it's planning right now around 200 people as the registered population, and then you're looking at 20-ish as the people playing concurrently.
Even though that is like the pessimistic numbers. Even now we more plan with 40, but let's say 20 as lower expectations.
Right. Yeah. Which is always good. So these servers will exist. So conceptually, people can think about, you're going to play your survival where you're going to have your server. And your server is going to look like everyone else's server. It's not going to be procedurally.
It is a handcrafted map, which is essential to the way we put content out. But we can get into that in a moment. Yeah.
Right. But then everything connected to that kind of MMO, full, massively multiplayer online core hub, where everybody can go and hang out and visit and trade and potentially make that a gateway into going and visiting other people's versions of the servers, where their towns or their constructions have been built. That, I think, is really interesting. And I think it's kind of something that's missing in some of the other ones. I can see where it would be problematic when there's very divergent server types.
That's the main downside of the whole setup. We cannot do that. We cannot easily make mods accessible to everyone.
Right.
We can do it, but at the moment you do that, you are cut off from the main hub and your progress is completely separate. You are not part of the game's economy anymore, basically, because we don't control the rules anymore.
Right. So there won't be connected to, and potentially even ever, but at least in the core concept of the game, there won't be private servers. There won't be mods. There won't be customizations. You won't be installing a thing that makes everybody turn into SpongeBob.
Yeah.
But in doing that, you've actually unified the entire population that's playing the game, and I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, so that is absolutely the idea, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then the content that's available, the building, construction, survival, gather resources, hunting, a little bit of exploration, set up your city, build your town. That core is something that every survival fan really tends to like. That's what I'm there for. I love the idea of persistence in building a thing. Then wrapping around that, the idea of the adventures, the challenges, and potentially, and I know you're looking at this too, the kind of what I would think of as assaults or invasions, or in Conan Exiles, it's the purge. In Valheim, it's the ground is shaking and the trolls are coming. So there'll be those elements too. Getting together with friends, being able to either go on an adventure or be ready to and work towards defending your town. Those seem like great content loops. So I'm really excited about that.
That's absolutely the idea. I think you already mentioned we do not do PvP. And we are not naive. We are 100% aware that with that, I personally think we take away a part of survival games that I've never really seen as an essential part of the recipe. It's just everyone started assuming, and I never really felt like it's as rewarding to the majority of players as people think. But we also take away a lot of content. Like PvP is in its core player-generated content. People come, destroy my things, I have to rebuild them, I destroy their things, they have to rebuild, and we just fight over resources. And so we thought, taking away PvP doesn't mean we have to take away player-generated content. We can just fight an environment together. And that is what you mentioned, town attacks is the current name for that we use, which is basically... Maybe I have to explain a little bit what a town is, and that makes it a lot easier. Because we currently use the term town. We are thinking of renaming this system because it doesn't really do the whole thing justice. The idea is you spawn into the world. And this world is, as I said, regathered. There is a gigantic shield generator, the Ultra Core. And the Ultra Core is spanning a shield over this newly reclaimed part of our survival map. Ambros is the name of that map. And that's where I start. I start in like a normal survival game, put down some buildings, gather some resources. But my job actually is to strengthen this shield. I am Corbourne. I am sent out as a new member of a new society to basically regather and reclaim things. So I put down a relay tower, something that funnels resources that I gather into the shield and also allows me to claim a piece of the land. Of course, our bad guys in the game don't like that. Sorgoth, what is it in English? My enemy, let's just call him enemy, basically hates this idea, and so on regular basis, he'll send minions to attack us. And what I just built, this relay tower and the buildings that are basically in its area, that is a town to us. And when I get attacked, that's a town attack. These attacks happen on a schedule. So the system will say, latest in 2 days, just as a random example, you will have a town attack. Of course, the intervals change depending on how big is your town, how much evolved is it town level 1, is it town level 10, is there 1 or 20 people in it? Yeah. So I can now decide, do I want to immediately fight this? Do I basically want to go out there and just immediately fight this attack? I feel strong enough, I've built defenses. Or do I want to interact with other parts of the system? Which can be events, which is something in the lines of quest, but there is no quest log. No one tells you have to do this, and this. Also, they adapt to the playstyle. They are also on the whole server. Everyone can participate. They are dynamic. They are not really quests, but let's just call them quests to make it simpler. Or it could say, go to an adventure and do this adventure until the end. You get a certain resource that you can then use to delay this town attack or make it weaker. And it could also just be super specific in a task of just fight bandits. No matter where, as long as you kill 100 of them, cool, this town attack, there will be no bandits in it because they are now afraid of you. Or get other people involved. I could go to the social hub and ask them to join me just to defend this attack. And so this is a constant motor for my progress. And these will, of course, eventually get bigger and bigger and more complex. And in our vision, in the end, they are kind of like raids. Basically, they have a boss. There's a giant guy who pops up on a Monday and says, I'm going to attack you on Sunday. You have all week, basically, to fight him, to come up with ideas how to best defend. You can invite other people. There's a roster on a normal server, you will basically have a group finder-like thing without it being complete anonymity. Sorry, not a native. That is a hard word, damn. Yeah, and that is also a lot in our game design per se. I think we brought this up several times that we want it to be that every time you see another player, it's the opposite of a PvP game. It is good. It is an enhancement to your gameplay. You see someone and immediately think, cool, that's content. If I follow them, or if I talk to them, I might find their home. And their home has vendors, and their home is different. And every time they get attacked, I might join in and help them defend and get loot out of it and make new connections.
This game hasn't even come out yet, and I'm already kind of afraid for my town.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that is a good point. It is basically transition of emotion. We looked at why am I in a PvP game so eager to defend myself? And it is competitiveness or that I deeply care for what I already achieved. I don't want to lose the things I worked for. And we don't have competitiveness, but we still have this, I want to keep what I worked for. And that's partly why we made our game seem so cozy, so nice. Why every spot in our game should feel like I could spend a few hours here, it would be nice. Because we want you to like what you build. We want you to care about your character. And that's why we mix in RPG elements, why it is so essential to us that you can make things pretty already. And we have a building system where you can throw things in different ways. I think Conan is a good example of that. In my opinion, really good building system. Super fun. The decoration system is great. Yeah.
You have a comic on your site that really brings that to light, too. I mean, because it goes through kind of the sort of fiery red, dark, and then at the end, it's the town building look, and it really makes you think, okay, yeah, I want to play there.
Cool.
Yeah. And Sorgoth we got to kick Sorgoth out because he makes everything icky and dark, and is trying to mess up all of our fun. That's a bold position, the no PvP. I completely it fits with me 100% because I never played PvP on any of these survival games. I shut off PvP right away on No Man's Sky. They're barely in there. But some of the servers and some of the subsets of the population on Ark and Conan, for example, are all around PvP. However, it's a different game. It's a different game, and I don't think it's... this happens in MMOs as well. It's a different game. You're no longer playing the core game. You're playing this thing where you're using some elements of the core game, like building, but you're using it basically as a weapon. And the really boiled down, stripped down version of this, I think, is build mode in Fortnite. So you could say Fortnite is a building survival game, but if you have build mode on, it's a pure weapon. You never build something interesting or nice. You never build something that's going to last potentially even more than for 15 seconds. And it's not, there's no persistence. There's no creative of what you're making. You're just using it as a weapon. I think that's fine. And those games can be really fun. I think, though, if you want to do that, then if you want to play a fighting game, you're also going to want a game that's balanced around fighting, and all of the characters and people and all of the skills and stats are all balanced. And when things are out of balance, people get really frustrated. Taking all of that and pushing it off to the side and say, we're not going to do that, I think is bold, but right up my alley. And then to hammer that home a little bit more, which you mentioned once, and I think we should say again, is not only just no PvP, but anytime your philosophy that you guys have talked about, anytime you experience and come across and meet up with another person in the world, whether you know them actually, in your game club or not, or have never met them before, it's an opportunity for something,
good for both of you.
Neutral or good. Opportunity for something good, fun,
exactly. Opportunity
positive.
is a good way to put it, because of course someone could decide, I am not interested in this interaction.
Right, you can just go your separate way.
Yeah. But ideally, you should very early learn that it is always to your advantage to interact with them.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting and a great spin. I get frustrated even in the games that do have a lot of collaboration and there is no PvP out in an MMO. Even when you come across a node on the ground and, all of a sudden two people are like racing to get it and I got it and you didn't. And there's almost like PvP going on in that way, or PvP. Yeah. So that idea that, and you guys have your work cut out for you to achieve this, but that idea of it's all positive, I think is really interesting and could take it really far from the collaborative worlds kind of perspective.
Of course, it is still quite challenging, though. First of all, it was super interesting to us, too. In the beginning, we just made the decision, because, as I said, and I don't want to offend anyone here, I think survival games are awesome. I've played all of them and I love them. But I saw myself very early, immediately always falling back to cooperative ones. I played The Forest rather than I played Conan after a certain while. And when I played Conan, even though I love Conan, I think it's one of the best survival games I've played, Conan Exiles. But we immediately jumped onto a private server where we just stopped doing PvP. I was just not interested in metagaming and in basically finding that one armor that is the best and playing that one build that is viable. And I totally get where the fun in that is. But we also brought up MMOs, and I'm more of a supportive player myself. I am just not that interested in the damage meters. And I see their value. I've valued these players so much in my guilds and groups, but I just never was one of them, really. And I felt more success from, in the end, having slain the boss than being the best at doing so, or doing the most damage while we did so. As much as that is to the advantage of the whole group, I am not competitive. And when we started advertising the game, telling people about it, the first time I think was about 3 months ago, where someone picked up on the no PvP, and it started at that being a selling point. There's so many people who so strongly connect with this idea. We did completely underestimate it. We thought what we have to tell is the idea of a season-based survival game, content regularly coming in, very cooperative. But the no PvP is where suddenly, people start peaking ears and where you get their attention. Because there is a lot of people who love survival games, but the idea of, I think we already said it. I think as nice as PvP is for the guy who's winning, or for the guy who's not constantly losing, it is so frustrating for beginners. It is so frustrating for so many players to jump onto a server, to try your best, to build something up, and then being confronted with your situation where the only possible gameplay approach would have been tryharding. And because you didn't do it so much, like as much as the other person, you lost, and it feels unrewarding. You don't feel like you've learned very much.
Right.
I feel like with PvP also, when you do win, it's a fleeting moment because the next time you don't.
Right.
Also, or the player is gone. I think that's to me the worst in survival games. That so often you win, and like we laugh about it, but everyone who's played Rust knows that every 5th player you kill the second time, they just log out. And you're like, yeah, ha, 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 they locked out. But be aware that might be a guy who's not there to play with tomorrow.
That was always in the games that I did do PvP on. Even, games like Eve and, where it's these big battles and you kill someone over and over and over. You know they're going to get demoralized. Even when I was on the winning side, I was trying to sort of make the point to the team, hey, let's give them a shot. Throw them a bone because
this is about the fun,
Right. When people leave the community, you're not going to have anybody to shoot anymore. What are you going to do then? So let's go for the
then I'm going to shoot you, Jeff.
Well, that happens regardless. You'll find a way in this game, I'm sure, too.
But yeah, I think in the end, the main motor for us was basically from a gameplay angle. Like we looked at it, and our founder team is very, very focused in what we wanted to create. It was very obvious, but we are quite diverse. Marcus, my co-founder, he is one of the founding members of G-Portal, which is one of the, I think at this point, the biggest server provider in the world. So we come from a server background. We know how things work when it comes to that.
Great.
And we were very aware where there's advantages and potential disadvantages to us, because we are PC gamers, I just assume, because you both said you played MMOs. We are very used to the concept in survival games of going on EU West double weather off 100% times TX277 Ghost Clan. And that it doesn't even occur to us that is a weird concept for a console, mobile, or even just most casual players, or even mid-core gamers. That's a weird concept. I do not know what 90% of these words mean. I do not know anyone in Ghost Clan, and I do not understand why I should play on their server. And we realized that is strange. Why is it this way? Because it's such a privated environment in so many cases, because you have to set rules, because there is one overpowering factor, which is in our mind often PvP, that dictates so much of the game design. And then players, of course, love changing it, which I totally relate to. I love changing the rule set too, because it just got boring after a while. And we felt like, hey, our other founder, Rene, has worked on MMOs all his life. I think 40 games that now. He started with Ragnarok Online, went to EverQuest, and he's worked on basically every MMO possible. And currently plays Final Fantasy XIV, which is always an interesting influence because it kind of feels like so much on a different end of the spectrum what someone is looking for. Because Marcus, the server guy, is super competitive. Like, you cannot do anything without him winning. We went to like an offsite event where we met the whole company for the first time, also dipping into the remote system, or the remote idea. And we played some fun games, and it was just the most hilarious thing to see Marcus argue with a judge who's not a judge, but just the organizer of a fun little game. And then Rene being there and being like, hey guys, we can maybe like all together win this. Isn't it totally fine? And I think we realized that there is a lot of value in PvP when it comes to the way content rolls out and how challenging it is and how new it is. And PvP can be so fun once you meet competitors that are on your level. But it is so contrary to our idea of a unified game world, of being easy to mix new players and more advanced players and making it interesting for both of them to play with each other. And as you brought it up, the general idea of making people interesting is very hard when you're up here in your progression and then there is someone down there and you run into them.
I think that's something to definitely get into, and which we will in a second. I just wanted to sort of cap off on that idea of PvP is exciting. It's exciting content. For somebody who's developing a game, it's also player-generated content, which is nice because
even
now
though it dictates a lot of game design too, because like everything is now competitive. You cannot make a building system that just is pretty or fun. You have to think about how could players abuse this, and
how are they going to break it? How are they going to abuse everything? That's not to say that there's not challenges, and I can already see the challenges and opportunities, the risk and the emotion and the idea of the invasion, and Sorgoth is sending something really scary and big my way. I got to get my friends. I got to call some people up. We got to schedule time on our Thursday night group night because we've got to take this apart. And multiple paths to doing that. And the idea that there's bigger and bigger challenges to overcome, and then adventures you can go off and seek for related to those challenges or not. I think there's tons of opportunity to have a really exciting, difficult, challenging opportunity around the gameplay as well. So I don't want people to think it's going to be Care Bear, you're not going to do it. You have nothing to do. It's going to be, boring or lightweight. It doesn't have to be that at all. Now, you just mentioned, which I think is great to get into too, which is the different levels. And this is something that impacts MMOs all the time. It's something that impacts every game that has sort of a server model. And I don't really understand it all the time. People do have a problem with there's people that are too high level and I'm too low level, because especially if there's a PvP element, well then it's all cards are off the table because I can't play at all. I can't compete. New World definitely had this problem where New World was this war system and outpost rush system, and players that had grind, get all the top gear. You get new to the game, you're new to a server, and now you've got months of your own grinding if you want to even survive more than 15 seconds in one of these PvP events. However, there's always going to be somebody better, somebody at the top, somebody with the best of the best of the best of the gear. What New World did is they said, okay, well, we're opening up some new servers, fresh start. And I heard so many people who didn't even PvP, didn't even do those kinds of things. Like, fresh start, just knowing that there were people that were above them or better. They're like, fresh start. I'm going to go there. Cause then maybe they thought, I'm getting all choked up. Maybe they thought that they would be on a more even footing and an even playing field, and that would feel better to them. But 24 hours into the fresh start, you got people that are way up here again. And, we'll always be up there.
It's not like they don't join those servers, the guys that were above.
Right. Right.
And the people that are willing to put more into it.
So the idea of making it such that a person who's new and a person who's old in the server can play together and have value and have valuable experiences and be able to collaborate and be able to contribute. That sounds really interesting to me. And I would hope maybe for some of those players that are just dying for that fresh start all the time, that they could get some value out of that, see that's available to them. So I'm interested to see what you guys are going to do there to sort of bring that to fruition.
I also noticed that this fresh start is exciting, and I know the feeling. When I played MMOs, I shared the feeling of missing out a month means why even start? Everyone is already gone past. And I think in MMOs that is often so much because the general loop follows so much activity on a server. Like when in World of Warcraft, which possibly most of the people listening who are interested in MMOs have played, it's the low-level dungeons are most fun when you play them with low-level players. And when they feel like something is an achievement of finally succeeding in them. And I've done it and it was hard because all the players were low level. And at a certain point, most players have their high-level characters and they play the end game and they are just not that interested in playing with you anymore, which is fine and totally understandable. But the conception in my head was why even level a twink, like a weaker or smaller character? If there's no content to play, I just don't want to play it for the sake of rushing it to max level and then finally having something to do with it again. I don't want to work to have fun. I want to have fun. I work so that I can afford to have fun.
Right.
Basically, we try to bring that in when it comes to content expansions, where we plan all our systems already in. It is super easy for us to take back or roll out content, because I think one of the smartest things Fortnite does is take out content. They have zero emotion attached to their features, seemingly. Like, whenever the game gets too complicated, they cut stuff. And as much as people might sometimes hate on Fortnite, it is one of the most well-crafted games out there. It is incredibly well thought through, and they take out systems whenever they don't benefit them anymore, which is a super smart decision. And we took the same attempt with our events, with adventures, and with the general nature of the survival progression, where we said, hey, there is new content coming in, basically. Like, our world has 6 main nations. We start with the Hedonists in Ambros, which is the first world. Very northern Italy or southern Italy inspired. It is like a very cozy world, super pretty, an abundance of resources. And the next one we're probably going to open up is the Liquid Meadows, which is a torn apart world, completely consists of water that can flow against the rules of gravity, much more intense and a completely different experience. And as soon as that happens, we will focus some of our progression on it, but we might also take some of the adventures back or make them simplified to focus more on the new adventures, and then eventually mix things up a little more on a weekly basis. What you might know from a seasonal system in a shooter, for example, where this day is this season is this, and you log in on Monday and an event is open. On Wednesday, it's not anymore. There's another event open, and there is a sense of there is always something new to do. Not everyone has already done everything, and the content has been chewed up and spat out already by 20 people. There is value in logging in today and playing something that I've already played because new people play it with me, or it's changed slightly.
So if you're a new player that's just starting during that phase 2, we'll call it the water gravity world, where do you start? Do you start back at Ambros and then play through the stuff that the current players no longer do?
No, you can basically pick where you want to start. You can also start in the Liquid Meadows. In the end, this is all one connected survival world. I think that's incredibly important to say. This is not I go over a barrier and then there's a loading screen. This is the same map. It just expanded in a certain direction, and you can spawn then as a child of the source, which is the second playable race that will potentially, like, all up for let's see, but we're already working on things. That's what you can choose then. Do I want to be a hedonist or children of the source? The hedonist being more human-like, having like some extended necks with some golden plates on them, and the children of the source being more like magical beings, more water-related, maybe kind of like an avatar-like creature, I think is what we currently imagine them like. Yeah. And you just pick, you spawn somewhere in the world, and you start your loop again, basically. And that's the advantage of our survival map not being hard packed in certain levels, where I go to the north and it gets harder, or to the south and it gets easier. That is just not an essential part of our system. There is harder regions, of course. They are more challenging, but at a certain point, we'll always try to put those into adventures, into a different instance where we can change the rules so that they're more interesting, more fun, or can even adapt the difficulty based on your level. Yeah, or your progress.
Your level, how many people, the progress of your town.
Exactly.
And if you start a new small settlement in one of the new areas, well, then it's small, and the challenges end up being small again, and it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Exactly. Even you have to put it, like, because having one gigantic town, also having, as I also start saying, because so many people on the team, you don't have a town. It is not yours. You can decide, I don't want to play with other people. I don't like other people. I don't want to do anything with them, which is totally fine. You can absolutely progress in the game. But ideally, you at least allow them to passively participate in your gameplay, because that will unlock a lot of content for you. So you don't need to know them. You don't need to speak to Susan and Peter. It just doesn't matter. They are just basically NPC to you. And you can even invite them into the town, and then you just share the town, and you make a rule set where you can decide the rules. And if they want to stay, they stay. If they don't, they don't. But you can join as many towns as you want. You don't like building, just join someone else's town. Let them do the building part, and you just farm. And if you prefer fighting, just fight and join a town where everyone else farms and builds. That's the main idea of this town system. So a new area comes in. Ideally, I start building a new home, but it doesn't need to be only my home. I can just find new people or work with the people that I already work with and build something up in that new area.
But when you say you're talking about you choose another town, are you talking about on that server of 20 people, or can you go through the main Coreheim and go to some other server?
So currently, that is the same server. It's a very good question. But of course, at some point, we want you to be able to first as a visitor go to other servers and then potentially even have different home servers. Currently, we think it is best for us to say you have one home server, that's where you belong. And if you change it, you permanently change it. That is possible, but we will limit it, of course, just because we don't want people to crazy server hop and just change their rules all the time, or just change their rules. But we want you to feel like, hey, there is a sense of progress in my gameplay. But eventually, it would be great if that would be possible too. But it is important to say, even if we don't launch most likely free-to-play, we are aiming to make this free-to-play. And in a free-to-play game, one of the biggest challenges is players are very easy to drop in, but also to drop out again. They have not committed to anything, why even stay? And so if we bring them in, and they did not pay a single cent, and then they jump between servers like crazy. These servers cost money, so we have to potentially pay for these servers. And that's not ideal for us if someone opens up 7 different servers, and none of them are actually played actively on, or they play a little bit on all these 7, so we have to repopulate them, keep them open. We want you to be active on a server, and we want every member that actively plays on a server to enhance everyone's gameplay. And the best way to do that is activity. So we don't want you to spread your activity over 60 different servers. We want you to ideally focus most of it. And if you want to play on a different server, you can make a second character. We don't mind at all. Make a second character, and that one can join a different survival server. No problem at all. It can completely benefit from the resources that you farmed on the first one. It's just a new journey with potentially new people or the same people who also want to try something new.
Yeah, interesting.
And we assign you to these servers. I think I didn't make that clear in the beginning. You join in, we do not do server browsers. All of that is not a thing. You press play and you get assigned to a server. If you want to switch it, you can do that. You want to play with your friends, so play on a server together. But you get assigned, which is super essential to us, because as soon as out of your 20 players, half of them start being inactive, we will just shuffle new players in. And for people who are not that familiar with it, 20 players does not mean there is 20 players. As you said in the beginning, it means there's 200 or even more players assigned to the server. Just 20 to 40 to 60 of them play actively. Of course, a lot of play testing. Yeah.
Right. I'm sure you'll pull those levers back and forth to determine what the assigned population can be, such that the active population at a busy time is something that the server can support. Which makes a ton of sense. I do think, and I know this isn't even all worked out yet, something that Seema and I will watch very closely. We help run a very large gaming community. We've got a big guild. It's huge in World of Warcraft. Well, I don't think we would be at that scale, because every other game that we play, which is all the games, it's much more reasonable scales.
Yeah, we had a 500 people guild in World of Warcraft. We texted the support and said, "Can we make it bigger?"
I think at our peak we were definitely in the thousands. Of people back in the day. We were one of the biggest in the world, Alea Est. Nowadays, much more reasonable. And
even I
something
know them,
something like 20 concurrent on a new game, that sounds great. However, we will have a whole bunch of people that will want to sign up and will want to play together. And I know it's not necessarily even solved just yet, but that'll be the kind of question that we'll have in the future.
And we do have a lot of people that want to play and then want to move on.
And
as a community, we kind of we're okay with that, because we just want the people to stick together. We don't care, what game you're actually playing. So
So
I mean, I of course, as someone who wants to operate a live service game, I care very much. But I totally see your point. No, but I get that point, and I think you mentioned private servers already in the beginning. So basically, our concept would be at some point to say the limiting factor here is the resource server mostly. We have to pay for these servers, and it is free to play. So of course, we limit the things that a server can do, and that is just there is a logical limit to it. But it is you can put more onto it. You can get a stronger server potentially. And if, for example, we make a system, or we already work on a system where we say, hey, here's premium servers or a premium membership to a server, where not only do you get preferred slots, but if enough people do it, we could even potentially say this server can have more active players. up to a bigger amount of players, because that risk is gone. We do not have to that much care anymore. It does not mean that this server is out of the system. No one can join anymore except for your friends. But it means that your friends get preferred entry if they are part of the group that has this premium membership on this server. But still, others will join. Your environment is still a vivid environment where we put new players or newbies in, or like people that just fresh started. So that is one potential way to solve bigger communities. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think I totally get it. Like most guilds I've been in were also bigger. And I think one of the most interesting ones that Life is Feudal. I don't know if I keep mentioning this game. Most people don't play it or did never play it. It was a super, for everyone who doesn't know, medieval simulation, ultra hardcore grind. One of the hardest grinders I've ever played. Like, I think I prayed for 6 weeks straight to become a maximum level monk and be able to like put a blessing on other people. And in that game, we had a gigantic community that needed to be organized. It was, I think, not as big as that guild, but 100 players, I think, that actively played and had a town together. Were trying to build a castle and actively played, and it was very hard to organize that. And at some point, that server just ran into a capacity problem. And we even approached the developers and said, hey, what if? Because this is, it was kind of a mixed model of free-to-play, premium, something. We said, how about we do something, we pay something, and then we get a better server for this specific group. And they, at that point, just, of course, didn't have the infrastructure for that. And that's where I got like, wouldn't it be cool if a game like this that has servers that are public and I can't mod or change the rules still had the option of saying, if this is so active, how can I maybe participate in making it more viably big? Yeah.
And with dynamic scaling infrastructure and the way servers operate today being very much different than the way servers operated back then, there might be some opportunities there.
It is just, we put it a little bit on the back burner because currently, we are an indie studio. We are 32 people. That is a lot. I think actually 35 people, which is a lot of people. Don't get me wrong. It's a big team. But still, we are basically operating like indies. And for what we're trying to achieve here, which is luckily not an MMO, because that is not the amount of people you build MMOs with generally. Or maybe some people do, but I'm a little scared. But it is at least an amount of people that allows us to think bigger when it comes to server infrastructure, but not in terms of, we will do all this, no problem, they'll dynamically scale, have fun with 100 people.
Right.
So, I mean, you've mentioned free to play a couple times now. What is attractive to you as a developer and as a studio with free to play? Is it that it gives you some flexibility, or?
I think it is. First of all, personally, I've played a lot of free-to-play games, and I generally enjoy. And I thought I was kind of surprised that there's so many people who are not. And I'm not trying to honeycomb the whole system. It can be super abusive. There's a lot of mechanics in the market that are the absolute worst I've ever seen, super predatory mechanics. And I'm lucky to call both my co-founders very good people, and my standard for that is very high. Neither of them would at any point have any pay-to-win features or anything like that even be discussed in our company. But still, I think for us, one of the biggest advantages, of course, being a live service game, of course, highly benefits from an ongoing flow of money. Let's say it as hard as it is. It just helps a lot. If you want to constantly develop a game, you constantly need to earn money. And in my opinion,
need people.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to build a lasting community and you say you care about the people you already have, then your monetization cannot be that you funnel new people in all the time and don't care if the old ones drop out because they've already paid. Of course, our approach must be we want to constantly keep you in. But then, if we want to get as many players interested as possible to build communities in a game that is so focused on other people being content to you, it is very hard to have the hard entry gap of a high price or even a monthly subscription where people might say, why should I pay this? They might be more committed. There's a gigantic advantage of people having paid for something. They are less likely to drop out of a game immediately again.
Right.
But it is harder to get them in the first place. And as a small studio with very limited capacity in marketing in the beginning, we said we calculate a calculable risk. We know how long we can last without any flow of income and say, hey, that is long enough to actually get enough people in the game and see if our idea works towards them. Rather than we throw some people in and then if no new people come, we don't have money anymore to develop content and everyone is just disappointed, but it is what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So I think that's why free to play was most interesting to us, because as much as it can be predatory, it has the gigantic advantage of the people who enjoy your game. Exactly. The people who enjoy your game can, in a non-predatory way, participate in making the game going on by buying a skin, by buying something that is just a completely normal convenience feature. And that is our attempt at it. And as I said, we will most likely launch on a early access premium basis where people get some skins, some other advantages, founders packs, basically. Of course, as I said, indie studio, it just takes a lot of risk out of it. But after that, transition and be open about that into a free-to-play model where we say everyone is welcome to join. And if you like it, feel free to get something that helps us keep this thing running.
We've talked with a few other studios about this opportunity to use these kinds of models in order to get games made. Mm-hmm. And yes, you're absolutely right. There are predatory, bad ways to use any model, any kind of model. Mm-hmm. This kind of idea, though, that any model just at the highest level is bad inherently is not true, because we can get more games made if we use these kinds of resources. Let's pivot for just a second, because there's a piece of this. Now, we've been talking a lot about mechanics and infrastructure and some of the gameplay loops. We kind of glossed over it, but I want to come back to it because this is some place that you kind of got started, which is the lore and the world and what that is. And now you talked about these different races and Sorgoth, and we've got this Sorgoth, which is sort of like a god, Sauron kind of character. Explain where that all came from. Mm-hmm. I think that's a huge piece of this. And Siva talked about the graphics, which I think derive from that too, and the sort of the visual aspects of the story. So talk about where that came from, and I think that's going to be a hook for a whole lot of people as well. Yeah,
also it ties a lot of things logically together. So I am, in Germany, a content creator. I've worked for a project called Rocket Beans TV, which made pen and paper role play incredibly popular in Germany. I think without being too bold, I can say that. It was at some point, or is maybe even the most popular content on a like Dungeons and Dragons style tabletop role play. Yeah, in that genre, in that Dachraum is what we say, like Austria, Switzerland, Germany. Yep. And for that show, I think at this point, we're coming close to its 7 years running now. I was allowed to write a lot of different fictional universes. We started in something zombie, then we had like a detective case in early London, science fiction, all of these worlds. And over the years, the show, as I said, is very popular and kept being popular, which is really, really nice. And it allowed me to write different universes all the time. And whenever I came up with one, there was ideas that just seemed sometimes actually too good, too much. Like hacker vampires who create punch cards with their teeth, or like dwarves that drink beer, but it's all made and they also power every machine with beer, and they have zeppelins full of beer, and they have tanks full of beer, and everything is beer, everything is brewed, and dinosaur humans and all of this. And it seemed like that's all cool stuff. I'll put it aside. I had a document over years of writing, I think 5 to 6 years, where I put all of these ideas that seemed fun, but too big to just be next to another idea, or too crazy because they would make a world ridiculous. And generally my approach was so often I make a very serious world, and my players are luckily very funny people, so they would just ridicule the world immediately, and that's how it became fun. It's a super serious zombie survival world, but they just immediately make stupid characters. And I'm like, okay, cool, that seems to work great. And I cannot thank them enough for showing me how much fun needs to be in a good world for it to be easy to access for people who are just a little alienated by too much of seriousness in certain genres. And so at some point I read an article that was about the writer's ego. And at that point I was only writing. My whole life was basically sitting down in the morning, writing fictional things, which is wonderful. I've always dreamed of becoming a writer. And that's all I did for all different kinds of projects, advice, games, anything that's out there. And at some point I read this article that was about the idea of us caring way too much about what we created and seeing way too much meaning in it sometimes. There is the tree of Gusavir with a Yoksur fest, and the people of Ongsal are celebrating. I'm like, dude, there's some people under a tree having a party. That's all that's happening. And they also said, why not just make things fun? Why be so protective? Why can there not be a single laugh in your fantasy world? Isn't your life funny? Isn't it funny what happens outside? And it looks like it used a lot the analogy of British humor, which so often looks at the abstract and ridiculous concept of seriousness in a society.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And
which Monty Python
exactly like mastered to just look at someone in a suit and let them do ridiculous things, and it is just funny because they're wearing a suit. And so I felt like, how about this? I make a world that is completely serious to everyone in that world. To them, it's completely clear. It of course makes sense. They take their own world incredibly serious, but it's absolutely ridiculous from the outside. And so I said, I'll just throw all of these together. And said, what's the most ridiculous name I can come up with? And that was Ultra Core back in the day. I felt like it's not just hardcore or mega core, it is Ultra Core. And then I thought, okay, that's already fun, and that's the name of the show. And then I threw these vampires in there, and I threw dinosaur symbiosis humans, and there is these steam dwarfs, and there is mutants that make make weird mutagens that make them gigantic. There is hamster humans that live in the same world as a giraffe humanoid, and there's little creatures and big creatures. There's magic, electricity, there's everything. It is a mix of steampunk, science fiction, magics, and basically fantasy.
I'm loving this.
Then that is so abstract that I thought, what is a good way to combine something like that? And I thought, it is a common enemy. That's how Lord of the Rings, it's the main conflict of the whole universe, of saying, well, we are all different and we hate being different sometimes, and we've forgotten how similar we actually are. But then there is, in that case, Sauron or Morgoth, which is why I also said, why even hide it? It is Sorgoth. Sorgoth the Devourer, which is also interesting if someone is interested in phonetics. Most native speakers will not really like sounds like th and ch. And so putting anything like that in a name, that's the bad guy. It is completely, obvious to most people in Western worlds. So, and I threw this world together and we played one round in that show. And people loved it. People loved the world. It was over the top. We invented everything on the fly. Only these 6 nations, the Ultra Core as a giant shield generator that has to protect people from Sorgoth came in. And people loved it immediately. And it was so ridiculous that I didn't care. I did not have to prove to someone that I reinvented dwarfs. I don't want to. Dwarfs are fucking fun. They're great the way they are. There's nothing to change about them that makes them better. And I didn't like elves, but I felt like there's a purpose of them in a fantasy world. So the children of the source are kind of like elves. And then I thought, what is even more over the top than elves in most worlds? And it's the richest rich people that are rich and rich. And that's hedonists. That's the only feature they have, basically. They're arrogant and rich. And everything they do, what's
your superpower? I'm rich.
I'm rich, yo. And basically in the world, they basically invented money and told everyone else it's important. And so they're now the richest.
So now they're rich.
And that's how also the logic of the world. It's kind of a mix of a soft and hardcore fantasy world. Like hardcore, which means how it's narrated. Like Lord of the Rings is a hardcore survival or hard-written survival world where basically everything makes sense. You can explain everything with everything. Every little detail has to fit into the world.
Fit very tightly together. Exactly. All the languages fit very tightly together.
Exactly. It's very logically designed. Where Harry Potter is a more soft approach at a world. There can be a clock in a house that knows where everyone is at all times, but they can't find Voldemort or anyone.
Magic gets made up on the fly.
Exactly, and students can fight grown-up bad guys who throw over a complete world. And I love Harry Potter, don't get me wrong. And I felt like that is so much freedom. It is so great to be able to design a world like that. And that's when, that came together.
You started this conversation with that idea of the writer's ego, and I think it can be extended to the creator's ego. Just to double down on that for a second, the idea of trying to be too serious, to thinking that you need to elevate everything that you create to that idea of like the hardcore, or you need to spend 3 years like Tolkien creating a language in order to make, otherwise your writing is going to be terrible. Getting your ego out of the way and making interesting, fun things that you want to make. And it doesn't even have to be fun. It can be serious. It can be, the hardcore, hard-boiled mystery that you like. And yes, it's not going to be, Arthur Conan or not Arthur Conan Doyle. It's not going to be Sherlock Holmes, but you can do what you want to don't think that your ego needs to make you the writer of writers, you're going to win a Nobel Prize in literature, and that you're not going to accept anything less.
Yeah.
So getting yourself out of the way so that you can get these fun things created, I think is interesting. Then you taking that and creating an IP around it and getting to play test that IP and using that as the core now of what's going into this game, I think is brilliant. So
thank you.
Even just process-wise, being able to play test an IP and then create that world, I think you'll be surprised at how much everyone will accept and not think that anything is ridiculous in the world. Even the players will get into their world and they'll assume the role of their character and think that, no, this makes a ton of sense. There's either 6 races and here's how we all work together. And what do you mean that's ridiculous or silly? Nothing. No, it's not silly. That's just the way it is.
I also feel like so often the earliest lesson I learned from transitioning something like pen and paper, like Dungeons and Dragons, into the format of a TV show back in the day, taught me that what a lot of the players that enjoy it consider incredibly valuable, the rule set, the clear things, how much stone can be in my backpack before this and that starts happening, is something that a lot of people don't value that much. And the holes in a rule set is what people start liking. And so with this world, I felt like, if someone asks me, how does this work? The answer can just be, I don't know yet.
Yeah. What do you think?
One day we will. Yeah, exactly. What do you think how this world works?
Yeah.
And
that's a great question.
I didn't say you write this world with me. It is my world. I'll decide what's part of it. But you can imagine anything you want. And in your world, it can be, or we can together decide to make it part of this world. And we had several universes on the table when we decided for what to make, because we knew what kind of game we want to make, even as much as that changes generally, of course, as soon as you start developing. But one of them was this IP. And also, I can't say enough how much it helps to have an IP, even if it is just in Germany and quite small. It helps a lot to have it, not just from the perspective of getting money into a project, but also having a general rule set really helps. Of not being, we can do whatever we want. It has to at least fit our law. We have a first condition, as much as we can change the law. But yeah, I love the process of being able to finally say to someone, I don't know, like just as much as you, I haven't even thought about that. And one of my first writing teachers said that we so often spend so much time on asking in our head questions that someone might ask one day that we start making that person basically our enemy, when in fact we try to entertain them. They will not poke for holes in your story. They will look for freedom in it. And the holes that you consciously leave in there are freedom and not mistakes. And I think I forgot that over years, how valuable that can be to a world. To just say, there's room for you in here. Just imagine what it could be, and we'll put it in here one day.
That really resonates. That resonates with me in so many ways as well. Even us doing podcasts, sometimes I try really, really hard to get everything right and get every fact correct and answer every question that I think someone listening would ask. And what I found, and even myself experiencing other podcasts, I like when maybe not everything is answered and not everything's correct, because then you as the listener engage. You engage your own brain and you say, wait, no, I think that's, these guys didn't get it exactly right. And then you get the comments and same thing in literature or in entertainment or in an IP, being able to have the gaps in between. Wow, they didn't really explain, how does the beer in the blimp, that's really heavy. There's got to be I bet I know the way, it leaves that freedom for that experimentation of somebody to come up with their own creativity when you don't answer all the questions. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, and I think that is part of the main idea that also resonated, is that common enemy, that throwing people together that are in their nature different. Our nations hate each other. Yeah. Most of them do. They don't like anything. There is people like the dwarves who do not respect nature in the slightest. To them, it is a factor that needs to be bent to your will. And then there is Sauromancers, which basically live on the back of a dinosaur. Their main city, Megalospoli, is on the back of a dinosaur. And if the dinosaur decides that it's thirsty, it goes to the ocean side, and it's an ocean city for the next few years. And if then the dinosaur gets hungry and eats a forest, then that is where you're going to live. You're going to live in the plains that have just been created by the dinosaur. To them, it is a foreign idea, and they live right next to each other. But they have to work together now. And we felt like I think a lot of people just like that idea of being able to be different from someone without having to be their enemy in a world.
Right. And having a common enemy that everyone unites against narratively works really well.
And I think having room for players to have their own sense of self is so powerful. And it happens so much in MMOs. People spend so much time customizing their characters. And what you're talking about goes even beyond that. It's like you're customizing your life in that world.
Yeah.
And that is a lot the idea, that where we try to keep as much freedom as possible in there. Of course, like I said, we are not a AAA super gigantic studio. A lot of our systems are at this point more small. Our building system leaves a lot of freedom, but of course, right now it has, I think, 17 pieces per set. We have several sets, but you can put them in any angle. And of course, we want to make it bigger and bigger and give you more and more freedom. But that's also why we kept the survival server so open. And there is spots where the game narrates, but it always narrates passively. You tell your story, and you can decide to listen to someone else's. We don't force it down your throat.
Speaking of freedom to operate the way you want, the way you've structured your studio and the freedom for all of your people to operate the way they want and need, I think is amazing too. So Heather, how's that for a segue?
We are a fully remote studio. I think that
fully remote.
Yeah, to me that was so I think we have not longer than maybe a minute ever discussed this fact. To all our founders, it was completely clear. Not only because of Corona, actually even before that, we existed before that phase. It was just, I don't know, was just so obvious to all of us. I have not worked in a company with a location for the last 6 to 7 years. That just to me, I'm not saying that to be fancy. It's just, it never even occurred to me that that's a thing. And so basically we immediately said, if we want to hire as quick as we want to, find as much talent as we want to, and make a diverse and interesting world with an interesting team, it is just so obvious to just put the word out there. No matter where you live, welcome to our company. And it is remote first, which means we do not have offices. We do full-on contracts. We are not we have, I think, 1 or 2 freelancers on the team, but everyone else is fully employed. Also, I don't know who's freelance, to be honest, because they also have vacation and everything is as if they were hired. So, and we said, with the benefit of that, we don't have to pay for offices. We save a lot of money on that. We will just be incredibly generous and respectful of people's time. If someone has a kid, we do never question the fact that during these hours, they do not work. There is no dictation at all when you work. We do have meetings, absolutely, let's just call them leads, even though it's not really the official title, for people in higher positions or in more managing position. That means 3 to 6 meetings, depending on the day. I would say, like, for someone like me, for example, and for the average employee, 1 to 3 per day, which can be designed around the time zones that fit you. And of course, that means, let's just be realistic, for someone like my colleague, who, like our lead game designer, Ari, is in Australia, and for me, I'm located in Japan, we spend most of this time, usually I have a meeting with him. Then around 4 p.m. is when the overlap with the European time zone starts. That's when I have most meetings with the people in Europe, which is kind of a cluster. Most of our employees are in Europe. And then later, in the earliest morning, I could speak to American colleagues, for example, or I can do the same thing in the evening. And that is just how things are set up. There is no active work hours. There's no time tracking. And we work very well under the assumption that the respect we give our employees and their time will be repaid in respect towards our time and the approach of making something great here. I do deeply care about everyone that works for us, and it's like a nightmare to me to assume that anyone would not work enough to make this a good thing. And that's, I think, why we rarely discuss that. And this sounds utopian. And of course, there is a reality to this, which can mean that someone slacks sometimes or someone does not work 8 hours every day. But I mean, it's just a reality. Forcing you to sit in office does not make you a more effective human being.
Right. And that's been proven over and over again. It's surprisingly how much it's been proven by studies, and yet every large organization still seems to fall back to a potentially non-optimal operation. However, it does take the kind of employee, which I think that you have, and the kind of leadership to say, we also have a set of infrastructure. We have tools to make this work. So we have the culture. we have the agreement of everyone, and then we have the tools. And there's so many modern tools everybody can adopt. And I know you guys use Slack. You talk about that. You have the How We Work page on your website where you lay out this
outdated.
blueprint.
We're updating that now because we felt like it's month old. Yeah.
Well, even so, it lays out there this template for how this modern organization, this remote first organization can work, including some of those tools. So you've got Slack. The one that really interested me, that when I first started talking to you, you mentioned a little bit, is Discord. You use Discord as presence and voice. And I said, oh, that's interesting, because I've also seen you in the Corbourne public Discord that us as fans have been interacting with. And you said,
that's the same Discord. Yeah, we are on the same Discord. Like the Discord that we communicate with the community. So this game, coming from an IP that already exists, resulted in the luxury of early attention, which is incredibly great for us because we're trying to build a social game. So we need feedback and we need people in. And so we said, wouldn't it be kind of natural to have them on the same Discord as we are? So when you join our Discord, you will see, 20 channels, maybe the typical channels you see on a game's Discord. Below that is about 20 voice channels that all the team is in at the moment you're there. Like right now, there's 15 people in there that just work. And like, there is no attendance. You don't have to be there. They are there either because they want to chill with other colleagues or they have a meeting with them right now. And they see everything you write. Everyone on this team is a mod on our Discord and can potentially interact, can be pinged, and can answer your questions. And that's why we're so quick at answer questions, because it's the same Discord that I'm on right now.
I posted a question in there. It was about the large communities, and you responded. And this is before we had connected. You've got the leads of the company that are just in there interacting, answering questions. Hey, we haven't designed that yet. Here's what we're doing. Blah blah blah. And all the time. And that I thought was both game changing, and the idea that you're wrapping the team into the public place where all of your fans are operating as well does get them at least the exposure. I'm sure
if they want to, of course.
Right.
We like in the beginning we had it when you join our company, you have all the typical onboarding, which is maybe like just to explain how this company works. You have Discord, that is where all the voice happens. Then there's Slack, that's where all text communication on a day-to-day basis happens. We have Jira, which is a project management tool. So basically you start as in every other company, you know what you're going to do in the morning. We have a morning call where everyone joins. If it is fitting to your time zone, it is totally fine. They change. One of them is very comforting to your time zone. So Monday you might just not join it because it's at 3 a.m., but the Tuesday one then is at a good time zone for you. So you join that one and just let someone else know. So you start your day, you have all your tasks that's been discussed with you like 4 weeks ago. You know what you're going to do today. You know what your meetings are. And we use Google Calendars to have these meetings. You can at any time with anyone in the company book yourself an appointment. If there's an open slot and any founder, you can have a call with the founder. If it is necessary for 1 hour, no one questions that. There is philosophies of not talking to someone. That is just completely normal. We do not have closed channels, with the only exception of 3 channels for the founders where we discuss things that are of private nature when it comes to certain employees, where we feel like we do not want, and there is 1 voice channel for only the founder team. Everything else is open. You can read every Slack channel. You know exactly what every team is doing at all times, and you are welcome to join in with your opinion if you feel like you should. And that's how this company is set up, basically. So we have kind of an office. It is just not a physical office. When you turn on your computer and start Slack and Discord, you are in the office. When you turn them off, you are not in the office anymore.
And the reality is, thinking about it that way first is such a superior approach to that being the reality, although you try to think about a physical office as being the core of your company, which is a lot of businesses are doing today, because nobody goes to an office even when you have that. And if they don't think about the online first, the virtual first, then they get themselves into trouble. And even
also, for us, it works so well because we have a great project manager with a lot of experience, because there is daily challenges. And it's like, let's be honest about this. There is employees who struggled very much. We had few, but we had employees, I would say mainly juniors, but that might just be because people who have more experience already know that's not for them, that they can't work like this. But mainly juniors who just missed the exchange with other people in the hallway, who are not that good yet at planning their day, or just it's not their character. We had people who said, I am lonely. And that is, of course, to us super alarming. And in that case, we can only do so few things. For example, we, of course, pay for social working space. If you want, we have employees who said, hey, I don't like sitting at home working alone. No problem. We'll pay for a social working place for you. And we had people who said, I don't need a work computer at home. I need a laptop so I can go to cafes. Of course, we'll send you such a laptop so that you can go to such a cafe and work there. It is completely up to you. But we had people where we were not able to overcome these problems, where we finally realized it doesn't work. Most of the time they did themselves. Then we talked about it. And in the end, it meant, hey, then this is just not the perfect environment for you. And it was very rarely a big deal. It was for both sides more of a welcome realization that it just doesn't work like this.
And that makes sense, especially someone newer in their career. We found this in a couple places that I've worked, a couple big organizations. When you don't have that connection and you're uncertain even about how your own job operates, not being able to sort of being alongside other people that are struggling through that can be difficult. I think that will potentially be overcome over time as well with better and better use of the technology. But even so, the best organizations like Microsoft and Accenture, where I've worked, will also take people, even when your career is going to be all remote and virtual first, they'll take them and put them for 2 months all together in a facility with executives and, training and onboarding and on a first project, even, doing interesting things so that
it is super valuable. We even did, I think, when was it? Last December, we said, hey, we need to bring everyone into one place. So in December, we flew everyone from all over the world into Austria. We rented like a hotel-like structure where it was like shared apartments for the team. And everyone had their own bedroom, of course, like kind of like a hotel, but with like shared halls and everything. And said, we want everyone to meet. We want these people to be meaningful to us and each other. We want to meet and it was super emotional. It was really great, super fun. And it brought the team a lot closer together. Yeah. But it also had I'm not saying, that is so essential and the best thing ever, and remote just can't give you that. We consciously focused on nothing but that. There was no meetings, there was no work, there was nothing. It is just meet other people, put your full attention on them as human beings and not as your colleagues. And then when we come back to work, they are your colleagues and those human beings to you. And that I personally think that's an advantage of remote, because for 1 week, there was no other activity than enjoying someone's company. And it was not just meeting them coincidentally in the hallway and meeting the people that you like. It was meeting all of them, getting to know them and seeing why you like them.
That's great. And taking that opportunity when that kind of things happens and focusing it on that instead of, yes, we're going to some other location, but we're all going to just be in our Slack channels and, doing our day-to-day job. That's the right way to approach that.
Also a company goal now to be able to do that again next year.
Yes.
And a company goal for this year to be able to do that again next year.
There we go.
I mean, I really like that idea because the companies that I worked for, a retreat had to pay for itself. You had to make a case that we're going to accomplish these goals, work-related things. But I think this is so much more valuable because whether or not you accomplish those goals on a retreat, quote unquote, is really not that measurable.
Yeah. Right. Our goal was to go to a retreat, basically. Just have a good time. I mean, it is a luxury that remote affords us, of course, but we basically said, we had a goal. And I personally think it is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than saying come out of it with the sprint planning for the next 6 sprints. It just felt like come out of it with a better understanding of who the humans you work with are and more understanding for their needs.
And I think if businesses were honest with themselves, that is the big result.
Yeah.
Of face-to-face meetings.
There are soft metrics that especially at scale, you can try to measure things like retention and employee satisfaction with their jobs and, sentiment across the company.
But it's really hard to connect retreats to retention and retreats to job satisfaction.
It can, it definitely can be. I think enlightened organizations do get that, and they do. Yeah, again, Accenture and Microsoft were both good about this because they understood that worked. And when when times got tough and they said, "Oh, we're not going to do an in-person meeting this year," everybody in the company felt it, and everybody understood that now we've lost something, and we can even potentially measure how much we've lost by not doing that. Let's go back to doing that. But you have to do a lot of work to make those connections and measure it.
But yes, Microsoft and Accenture. But there's a lot of companies out there that still prefer to have their employees commute hours a day.
Yeah, which is crazy.
from some angle, for me, understandable. I think so many times in interviews, especially around German Gamescom, we had the first interviews where people start. I mean, we are still quite early and we don't have a gigantic marketing budget. So it's more like who stumbles upon us. So also thank you for the invitation, because we really appreciate it. So we had a lot of interviews for the first time, and people, of course, asked a lot about the remote and why we chose to do it and and I often felt like, I mean, because, and I'm not just saying that to sound fancy, to me it was just, why would I do the opposite? Not because I think it's bad, but because it's just such an obvious A or B selection to me, not this is what the setup is, and then you can also do this thing. It's just, this or that. And just, it seemed like the more obvious solution that comes with a lot of course, obvious challenges, but as much as the other. I don't understand how, because I don't see 1 hour of commute in every employee, and it doesn't feel as painful to me as it does to them, it isn't there. It's not like it makes their life better. And you have to name that factor when you talk about the benefits of a system. And when you live in the Netherlands, let's be honest, not a problem at all. You have wonderful business cities that you go to by incredibly reliable trains. And I felt the same in Tokyo. And in Tokyo, I would have probably also more likely said, let's do an office and people commute here. But we are just not in Tokyo. And none of us wanted to move all of us to Tokyo. And we did not want to be in Amsterdam. We just wanted to value our lives as much as we do the ones of our employees. And the easiest way to do that is to not drag them out of it.
And especially in the organization that you're putting together, where people with experience and talents are coming from lots of different places, making it virtual first allows you to get some of that unique talent, some of the best of the best.
Talent is a good is a good trigger word, because of course, also we are a small studio with no game released yet as this studio. So of course we need to be as attractive as possible. And to a lot of our seniors, the main attracting part is that we pay you fair for a remote environment, and you have all the benefits of that. We do not expect you to track your time every day. If you have children, like most of our employees, like it's so weird because we don't do like any statistics on it, but recently ran into the fact that basically everyone in the company has an animal, because it's just people who like to stay home. And I don't want to go away from my cats, my dogs, or whatever. Then most of our seniors have just gotten a child. They are new parents, which just, of course, I want to stay home. I do not want to get away from a child that just appeared into this world, that just was brought into this world by us. I would rather be able to support my family. And it's just so relatable. And that is a great benefit for us, because it allows us to hire people who would generally be out of our league.
Yeah, which is great. Again, more benefits. Okay, so you've mentioned it's in development. You've mentioned you're working to get it to release. In our last couple minutes here, why don't you tell us sort of...
I also have more time, like no rush at all.
Well,
I know.
This has been amazing. And I knew this one would go long, which I'm perfectly happy with. I think this is going to be our longest so far, which I love. So in our last few minutes, talk about that. Even in the broadest terms, what does the roadmap look like? When, when for me personally, when am I going to be able to get my hands on early access? And I don't care what anyone else wants to know. This is what I want to know. When am I going to be able to get in there and play?
We are getting very close to an alpha, a playable alpha. Of course, I'll gladly send you guys invites. Please let me know feedback, because this alpha is very focused on testing very specific parts of the game. And it is an alpha. We're currently sharing pre-alpha footage. I don't want to sound rude, but a lot of people underestimate what that actually means. Expectations are high these days. And we are very fast performing for a studio of our size, but we are still a small studio compared to AAA. And the things you see look so flushed out because we've been working on them very fast, very hard, and with a lot of people. And alpha is for us about testing specific features. You will see a visually very nice outline, but for example, there will most likely be no adventures in there yet. And the social hub is basically a block out still. I mean, maybe actually it's not, but let's just assume the worst case. It's a block out, there's no adventures. You just can build a town, build some stuff in it, gather resources, craft some recipes. And that's what we want to test. And then after that comes beta, which is it beta? Yeah, beta in English, right? I keep
beta.
Beta. Oh, well, perfect. That's easy. That's the same pronunciation. Okay, beta. Basically, we're going into beta where we want to test the whole system, where all these factors need to be there. We want to test how well they are intertwined and how well they work. And then this year we'll go into early access. And as harsh as it sounds, we have to. There's just no way around it. We are not blind. Right. We look at our competition. We see when they release or most likely to release. So we have a release window and that has to be met. There is no way around it. Nothing in this world will change that. And that might
exciting.
Be, yeah, exactly. For us, it's exciting, but it's also, of course, a challenge. And it is sometimes hard to explain to people. We are in this weird little thing between being super indie and being AA, where we have to compete for a lot of players in a market where there is bigger players than us. So we have to work around them and wait for them to do something and then react to it rather than be proactive and just release and say, yeah, everyone else, see where you get those players. And yeah, super exciting year for us. We will go into a full-on early access. The beta will also be more open. The alpha is invite only. We will mostly invite from our Discord. So whoever hears this and says, this is an interesting game to me, you should join our Discord. I'll assume you put a link somewhere and just, Corbourne. Yeah. You'll find it. It's a very unique word. That's where we will send more information. It will happen very soon. Then in beta, we will invite a lot more people, also happening this year, and early access is open to anyone, basically.
That's amazing. And I really encourage anyone that is interested in seeing the process evolve, go to the YouTube channel as well.
Oh, yeah.
Go to the YouTube channel, look at the developer updates, and look at the development as it goes along. This is something that a lot of studios would not show you. They would not open up until they have something that's really ready to show, almost creating trailers. And you are on there on a dev client with blocked out buildings, but in a character who's like naked.
Yes.
And just saying, okay, I know we don't have any armor yet, but it's naked. I just wanted to show off these animations, and here's how it works, and here's the chopping of the tree.
Who joins a community in pre-alpha is not an idiot. People know what they can expect.
Which is amazing. And I really like, and this is what I'm really going to have fun following this year, is just to see that progress in the steps, because it really gets to what we are really interested in, which is how games are made. And being able to see the layers and layers and layers that go on that a 30 people team is working on over the course of the year, and how it grows and how it evolves. And then post early access. What is it going to look like for the year after that and the year after that? That's going to be really fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think that will also be the most fascinating for us. There's a lot of learnings. In the beginning, we thought we don't have anything to show yet. So our story, our lore, that must be the thing we work on. That's why we built a story trailer already. And then realized it is kind of confusing as a lore if you've never heard anything about it. And people ask for in-game, of course. And why wouldn't they? They are so used to seeing in-game immediately. We did not have any in-game. Our trees, for example, is the last asset finally going this week. That was still a placeholder asset. And after that, everything you see, the grass, the stones, everything is ours. And everything else is a block out, which is, for me, of course, super exciting. And I think to someone who's not in the industry, it is sometimes hard to understand. Why is it so hard to build a tree? I don't really get that. It is, damn, it's hard. Like, I've never sent so many iterations of something back as for these trees. Finally having a super good artist who did that. Yeah, but that is the main journey for us. We shared so early because we had to and we wanted to. And for us, it is coming to a point where people gladly share what we share with them in the hopes that more people get interested. Because I cannot underestimate, that is, we have to build something that is unique, beautiful, and is incredible fun to share with others so that people feel like, I want my friends in this. And that will be our main marketing drive.
So when I call up my friends and say, I need somebody to come help defend my town this week, you got to jump in here and start an account and help come man the guns. They'll get on.
Ideally, everyone does that about 20 times. That'd be great.
Yes. All right. Well, this has been amazing. This
has been.
Thank you so much.
One of the very top of my most anticipated 2023 new studios and new games. So I'm super excited. I really hope we're going to stay connected as we get to early access. Maybe we can do an update and sort of celebrate that. And we will definitely talk to you soon.
Yeah, I'll definitely send you keys for the alpha. They're coming soon.
I would love that. All right.
Yep, definitely. We'll be there.
In the next 2 to 3 weeks, these keys will arrive probably. Alpha is very close.
Awesome. Awesome.
All right. Again, thank you, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much.
This has been a New Overlords production. For more, please visit newoverlords.com for video, subscribe and feed links, and other ways to help the show.